Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Roundup. No special announcements or anything, so let's jump right in. The first thing I'm going to talk about this week is for hardcore fans of Castlevania soundtracks, because there is now pre-orders for a vinyl box set that covers basically every soundtrack of every game from the first in 1986 all the way up to 2010's Harmony of Despair. And this is a $550 box set that contains 974 tracks and over 30 hours of music. The tracks are newly remastered, with some only appearing in this release. And the box set is limited to 500 hand-numbered copies, and apparently quite a few have already sold. So this is one of those things where the average soundtrack fan is going to go, neat, but no. Whereas people who are hardcore fans who love stuff like this is one of those things where this is money well spent for you. And I absolutely appreciate stuff like this. And I try to always be very fair, because if you said, hey, Castlevania soundtracks are awesome, but I'm not spending $550 on it, that's totally fair. And also, if you say, this is amazing, this is exactly what I wanted, I can't believe I get to buy this, yes, take my money, that's also fair. So this is just one of those things where, if it's for you, you already know, and if not, that's cool too. I'm sure there's plenty of other ways to listen to most of these songs. And if you do purchase it, it should be shipped to you Q1 of next year, so within the next 4 or 5 months probably. So yeah, it's a neat one. I never mind talking about stuff that not a lot of people might be interested in or might actually purchase. I think a lot of people would probably be interested in enough to click on the link in Crystal's post and go through and kind of see what this has to offer. But I'm not really sure how many are actually going to spend that much money. So let me know in the comments. I'm curious. Maybe I'm wrong, and 100 of you are going to just snatch up these last of them as soon as you hear this, or maybe not. I don't know, but I thought it was cool. Next up, Marco Retro just posted another review of a device that could downscale modern signals to work on CRTs. And the Tetra Vio is a scaler that, if you own one or if you're able to get one free from your job or something like that, absolutely pick it up. The amount of inputs and outputs this thing has makes it a pretty interesting piece of equipment, especially because it could allow simultaneous outputs to CRTs and other displays as well. However, it is kind of laggy. It's almost 3 frames of latency. So it's one of those things where if you don't go hunting one of these things down. This is one of those, like, if you stumble across one, cool. But if you're going to spend the time and money on something that you're going to use for downscaling for games, then you're probably going to want to stick with an OSSC Pro or a Tink 5X or 4K. But I think that this is one of those subjects that if you're into downscaling and you're curious about devices like this, you're still going to want to read the post and watch the video, because even though this might not be the downscaler for you, every time I watch one of these videos, I learn a little more about something that I might want or didn't even know that it might be a feature I'd be interested in. So I strongly recommend anybody who's even remotely into downscaling to check out Marco's video and post. But respectfully, I don't think this is some hidden gem downscaler that you're going to have to, just scour every electronics company and see if they have one left over for sale. I think this is just more of one of those, if you stumble across it, awesome. But if not, use the tools that are designed by the retro gaming community to do exactly what we want it to do. But as always, thanks to Marco for doing these, because I just find them so interesting, and it's just really awesome to be able to reference this stuff, especially when people say, oh, well, how does this compare to another? What about this feature? I think that these videos and the entire downscaling section of RetroRGB that Marco wrote are just really important. Next up, 8-Bit Do have just opened pre-orders on a full-sized retro-inspired mechanical keyboard. So almost exactly a year ago, they opened pre-orders on a smaller sized keyboard that didn't have a number pad built in, and they were available in different color schemes, and it was pretty neat. But a lot of us complained that we really need the number pad, because I have always been using one forever. And in fact, even when I got laptops, I would always get the bigger ones to have the number pad built in. So I guess maybe 6 months after that, they released a separate number pad, which is cool, but I don't like a bunch of stuff on my desk. I like everything combined in one, and a lot of people agreed. I actually was kind of wondering if I was just being a weird, grumpy old man insisting that I wanted it all in one. But when I talked about that, a lot of comments and a lot of people on social media agreed with me and asked that 8-Bit Do just do a full-size keyboard, and they listened. And that's exactly what this is. This is just a full-sized mechanical keyboard that's Bluetooth, 2.4 gig wireless, as well as wired keyboard if you want. And it also is going to come with those 2 fully programmable buttons. And the price is $120, and they're scheduled to ship basically in a month, maybe mid-December, by the end of this year, but about a month. So the ones that are available to pre-order right now have color schemes that are inspired by the gray NES or the red Famicom, and they look really cool. I pre-ordered one. This is the first one I'm taking the plunge on, and this is also the first time in 2 decades that I've spent more than like 20 or 30 bucks on a keyboard. And because I used laptops for so long, the keyboards I've been using are these really thin, basically the opposite of a retro mechanical keyboard. So I don't know how I'm going to like this. I don't know if I'm going to end up regifting this to a friend or something like that, or if I'm going to absolutely love it. But that was definitely, for me personally, one of the things that I needed when I was going back and forth between a PC and a laptop was a keyboard that was similar in feel so that I wouldn't just get used to one. And I still use a laptop, that same old laptop I bought right when I started RetroRGB. I still use that occasionally, but now that I have a room where I could actually put my arms out without touching a wall and a cabinet, I almost always just stick to my PC. So I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on that. Do you use multiple styles? Once you go full-size mechanical, is it impossible to go to a laptop? I don't know. I'm really looking forward to reading people's opinions, and also kind of figuring out for myself when it arrives what I'm going to do with it. But I've always thought they looked really cool, so I'm looking forward to trying it out. And also, I like the customization app that they have for it, because I'll mostly just use it exactly as is, but I'm sure there's a few things that I might want to use it for that I think might be pretty cool. But you could pre-order this or any of the previous versions through links right here on the page. And yeah, let me know what you think. Are you getting one? Do you think you're going to have to relearn how to use it? Or I don't know. What do you think? Ian, aka Historic Nerd, just released a video about the story of the 32X. And what sets this video apart from all of the other ones out there is Ian approached this from all of the new information that's been learned through Sega leaks and new interviews and all of that other stuff. Because up until recently, this ongoing story was that Sega of Japan pushed the little mushroom turd and Sega of America didn't want it at all. But it turns out that it was something that both sides of the company looked at as a way to leverage an existing customer base without making them buy something that makes their previous stuff obsolete. So the perspective of, hey, the Saturn's going to be delayed, but we still have millions and millions of Sega Genesis consoles out there. We could do something like a Neptune that'll play Genesis games, but and also, what would be 32X games, but that would alienate everybody that has a Genesis because it would technically just be the next console that's backward compatible. So what if we did an add-on that might allow them to have new functionality? So this is, 30 years ago now. So this is one of those things that you got to remember in context. No one had done stuff like that before. And Sega's other peripherals were pretty neat. The Sega CD didn't sell nearly as many units as the Genesis itself, but it was awesome. It was a way for many of us to get a CD player. I didn't own one before that, I think. I'm pretty sure I didn't. If I did, it was whatever the cheapest Discman style thing was. And it was really something that I thought was a really awesome addition to my Genesis. And the 32X, I could see how they thought that might have been the right move. And in hindsight, which, hindsight is always very easy to talk about, right? Anybody could be a Monday morning quarterback, but it seems like the better way to have approached leveraging their existing install base might have been having more expansion chip cartridges. Because Virtua Racing was $100 when it was released. I think I got mine for $75 because most of them equalized about that in price, but that was a third more expensive than the other Genesis games. But for the time, it was a pretty cool arcade port. And I think if they had done stuff like that, even if the games were $75 or $100, you don't have to buy a $200 peripheral to then buy a game. You could just only buy the games that you were interested in. So I think that might have been a better move to kind of hold people off, especially if they could have done something like take a cheaper low-end version of the Saturn's processor as the expansion chip, because that could have allowed developers to start writing code for it and getting used to the new platform. But once again, super easy for me to sit here 30 years later and tell Sega what to do. But much like dipping back into time, it's cool to speculate and fun for me at least. But I don't know. I really enjoyed the video, and I think that if you're a fan of video game history and you want some clarification about the history of the 32X, Ian's video is great, and it's something that you would enjoy. So definitely check it out, and let me know what you think about my stupid expansion chip idea. My guess is that many of my friends who are much smarter than me are going to comment and tell me exactly why that's a dumb idea, but that's fine too. I'm just interested to see what people would have thought about that. Now it's time for this week's Mr. Updates, care of Lou from Lou's Retro Source. As usual, I'm just going to skim through these, but if you want more details and visual examples, please check out Lou's video. First up, Greg from Laser Bear showed off a prototype of a CEC enabler, which is a device that helps you control your Mister via HDMI. And I think this is one of those things that, as it gets closer to production, I want to do, or one of us should probably do, a deep dive video. I think while it's awesome and I appreciate Greg showing the stuff off and Lou covering it, I think this is going to be a pretty important product for many people. So this is one of those things that I'm going to hold off and kind of focus on a deep dive version at some other point in the future. Next, a new version of the Taki's Mr. Pi has been announced that will include built-in SD RAM, just like the QM Tech board, and that revision would start shipping with batch number 3. The non-SD RAM version will still be sold for the same $99 with no pricing on the new revision, but Taki's pricing is always great, so I can't imagine it would be more than the original with a RAM stick, so that's fine. Next, RetroFrog is going to provide another option for a QM Tech DE10 alternative. An image and video was posted of the case, but it's still in development, so that's cool. Choices are always a good thing. RetroFrog is also working on a USB-C to 5-volt adapter for Mr. setups. So if you're somebody that wants all of your devices to be powered by USB-C, then that would probably be a safe adapter. And as long as it has enough amperage, that should be fine. But you could say the same thing about any barrel jack connectors. So I'm all for this. Next up, Wicker Waka officially released the IRM M90 core, and it currently supports Bomberman and Bomberman World, but other hardware variants will soon be added to support more games. Next, the developer Reiki has released a beta core for the arcade Konami Bubble system, and during the beta phase, the core is only available to Patreon subscribers, which I'm always totally a fan of. Keep your core beta group as people that you could easily communicate with, and then once it's a little bit more stable, release it to the public. Next, Hotego recently released the WWF Superstars core to the public, so now anyone could download it just by running update all. So much like I just said, Hotego does the same thing. When the cores are ready for the public, then those are all released completely for free. And the developer of the One FPGA, so it used to be called the Gollum FPGA menu, now it's One FPGA, posted a video going through the setup process. And this is an alternate Mr. firmware that's concentrating more on ease of use. Things like multi-user support, game sorting options, options to launch games through keyboard shortcuts, and basically a whole bunch of cool features. And I think this is absolutely awesome. If it gets to the point where it's really stable and it offers a lot more than the original, maybe the team will work together. The Mr. team will work together on it. And until then, at least you're not, and I mean this with love, of course, but at least we're not bothering the Mr. devs who are working on really important stuff to work on menus. I really appreciate this is like the spirit of open source, right? Like work really hard on something. And if it doesn't work out, I'm sure whatever you did could still be applied to other things. And if it does work out, great. Maybe it could be rolled into the main, maybe not. I don't know, but I just feel like approaching stuff like this is awesome, and especially if it's out for release, anybody could help test and try it out now as well. So if you were looking for an alternative menu system, maybe this is something that might be worth trying out. But that's it for this week. As always, thanks so much to Lou for keeping up with all of this stuff. There's no way I could do it without him, so I'm very happy to support on Patreon. And if you rely on your Mr. News as much as I do, you should consider that as well. Tito from Macho Nacho Productions recently posted a video about a portable version of the original PlayStation that could have been in an alternate timeline. Basically, he saw a video from another developer, hardware hacker, that took a controller, an official PlayStation controller that had a spinner built in, and modded it to be a portable PlayStation. And this was a Halloween themed episode where, if you've seen any of Tito's previous, they're always really awesome and detailed with cool openings, and they're just like mini movies at the beginning. Very cool and fun to watch. But I love the concept behind this because while doing exactly what Tito did isn't exactly the best experience for a portable PlayStation, what he and his friend Kyle, who had helped work on this and build some boards for it and stuff like that, did was basically start modeling and open sourcing this. So if you're watching this roundup on video, you might see in the thumbnail, it is a very cool looking portable device, but it also has the L and R buttons on the front, which aren't really going to be great. But if this thing is modeled and we could then print our own, or somehow make our own, make an injection mold if this was ever a thing, you could put those right on the back, and that would also extend the back cover a little bit to allow for bigger batteries, and maybe you could even make it so that it could fit a round display, and on the top and bottom maybe you could just have stats like battery life, temperature. I don't know. I think this is just a really, really cool root of an idea. And if this stays as just a neat video on YouTube, I still think it's 100% a win. I really enjoyed watching it, and you probably would too. But I also think projects like this could have the potential to take on a life of their own. So definitely check out the video and the post as well with some of the extra info in here. But this is just one of those things that if people really thought this was cool, they could make this into a completely standalone product. Now, this is Raspberry Pi based, but there's so many different things you could do, especially if there was a custom shell made for it, 3D printed or whatever. So I don't know, check it out and let me know what you think. But I really enjoyed the video, and the whole time I was watching it, my nerd developer brain just kept seeing what could be if people wanted to take it a little bit farther. So check it out if you're interested, and this was a very enjoyable episode to watch. 8BitDo have just opened pre-orders on a black version of their N64 themed wireless controller. So I got to back up for a moment for this to make sense. A few weeks ago, Analog opened pre-orders on their FPGA-based N64, and at the same time, 8BitDo opened up pre-orders on a white and black version of a wireless controller that had a button layout that would be exactly what you'd expect for the N64, but in a more modern looking and feeling controller. Except the black version of it looked like it sold out immediately. So a lot of people that I know that went to pre-order it thought maybe just everybody rushed out to get that one and it sold out. But apparently it was never actually put on sale. So only the white one went up for pre-order. But now both are up for pre-order. They're both the same $40, and they're due to ship in March, which I'm assuming that means that's when the Analog N64 console is due to ship as well. So if you're a fan of 8BitDo controllers and you take a look at this and you think it's something that you might want to use, absolutely check it out. But if you are looking for a controller like that now, today, there's still that Retro Fighters controller that I reviewed a while back that averaged only 8.5 milliseconds of latency when Bluetooth was connected, and 3.3 milliseconds of latency over USB, which are great numbers, by the way. So I'm absolutely not trying to take away anything from the 8BitDo version. I'm just saying if you don't want to wait and you want to try out a Retro Fighters controller instead, you could purchase that in either gray or gold right now. But if you feel like getting the other one, maybe you just like the form factor slightly better or something, then go right ahead and pre-order this one. Or if you just want one in black instead. But I just wanted to put links to both because, the choice is yours. Get whatever you feel like is going to be best for your setup. Last week, Ken from the What's Ken Making channel posted an absolutely awesome deep dive video that reviewed Taki's DE10 Nano alternative and compared it to the QM Tech and the original DE10. And to skip to the end for a moment, all of these are great choices, and if you're only using it for playing games on Mister, you're not deep diving any of the developer-focused features of the original DE10, either of the alternatives are great choices, and you could get started for less than half the price of the DE10 Nano. So that's great. I strongly recommend all of my fellow nerds watch this video and even the other one on the QM Tech board, because Ken really dug in and answered all of the questions we might have about this. And while there are a few things to note, which Ken went over and I'll probably touch on in a second, overall, it's completely fine to use and just something that you could definitely rely on. A few things to note is the two alternatives do have slightly different features than the original, and there are mostly things like the QM Tech won't fit any of the other kits or cases, but also the QM Tech is missing a 9-volt power rail, which is at the moment we think the only use for it, which is actually answered in the post after the video went live, is the Mr. Multi-System or the M3 Mr. might actually use that for voltage on the SCART pin, I believe. But stuff like this that's just really awesome that in the deep dive that you get all of this stuff answered. The only other thing that Ken noted is don't use a USB PD power supply, because it's just going to create too much heat, and there's no point in it because you can get quality standard USB-C power supplies for cheaper anyway. And I've also been warning all of you about this I've been warning you about power since I first started, but specifically USB PD stuff since we did that podcast a while back. And it still baffles me how a lot of people didn't seem to listen or thought we were overreacting. But now there's even more proof of sometimes if you don't need it, don't use it. And I would personally stay away from USB PD all the time unless you really knew that you needed it. But if you want answers on any of this stuff and you want an awesome video and an awesome write-up, absolutely check this video out and check out the post, or probably both, because the post has some follow-ups on it. And it was just really cool to see solid proof that both the QM Tech board and Taki's board are great alternatives at a lower price, and either one would be fine to purchase, with some of the very minor shortcomings in mind that you'll see in this video. So thanks so much to Ken, and I also wanted to welcome Ken as a contributor to RetroRGB. His work on these have been absolutely amazing, so I hope to see more of his posts on anything that might be a good fit for RetroRGB. So welcome, Ken, and thank you. Well, that's it for this week. As always, thanks to everybody who watches, listens, plays nicely in the comments, and especially thank you to anybody who supports in any way, because it really is you who's keeping all this stuff alive. So thank you all so much, and I'll see you next week. This week's Roundup is brought to you by Neo Paradigm Entertainment, connecting Southeast Asian influencers with opportunities in the West.